Today we are going to be mainly focused on these four main concepts: the loop, the Optocore IDs, the optical mapping, and clocking. I want to share with my friends out there what the concept of the optical loop is. So basically what I've got there, as you can see, is a ring, which is kind of the connections. Let's put it that way. And on that loop, I'm going to seat two devices. I'm going to start with a Q5, so I really like it, and with the stage rack, which is the minimum optical system we can have, one console and one rack. As you can see, I got connections to the left and to the right of each of the devices, and that's the loop. That means we have full redundancy on the cabling. If I lose one of the cables, the audio won't stop, and that is great. Also, the loop is really powerful. It can have many devices sitting on it. So for example, I've got a monitor SD10. I might have also an SD11 running the matrix output. Why not a Q7 for the television feed? So I have a broadcast Q7. And I still have some space, so I can have an SD9 doing all the recordings. So that's the console end.
All 5 of those consoles can actually see that one stage box. And what the great thing about the optical system is each one of those consoles could have an individual output card assigned to it as well. So from a very basic setup, that is what you need: one console and a stage box. But as you can see, with multiple consoles, you can still be sharing that input and output information across those 5 desks. So we can actually connect up to 14 stage boxes inside one optic loop. Now that's pretty powerful, and that's a redundant connection as well. So you can have up to 5 redundant desks, 10 consoles essentially, and 14 stage boxes. Yeah, so for such a large network or such a large setup, each device is going to have a unique ID or identifying number, so everything knows where everything else is. So the system uses 24 IDs, and these are reserved for desks and racks separately. So IDs 1 to 10 are exclusively for your consoles. IDs 11 to 24 are exclusively for your stage boxes. So as shown on the screen, you'll see that 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9, in terms of those ID numbers, are used for the main mixing engines. So if you have a redundant engine next to your main mixing engine, these are provided with the adjacent even number, so the 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10.
I just want to point out how cool the clocking is in our optical system. It's a self-negotiating system they use, in which always the lowest ID has the control. Every device in the loop is clocked to Optocore. So automatically the system detects when the lowest ID is no longer there. It will switch to the next lowest ID. I think the SD rack, it's probably the best rack in the market, to be honest. It's extremely powerful. It can have up to 56 inputs and 56 outputs, dual redundant PSUs, a very large MADI connectivity. I mean, it's got 4 MADI outputs, Tom.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
That's great. We can feed 4 devices with the same inputs. That is great. But then on top of that, we have the optical connectivity, which it's just, it's just amazing. It's an incredible device.
The rest of the ports that we have available are the MADI BNC ports. So you have a MADI main and MADI auxiliary, as well as extra MADI split outputs, allowing you for 48 or 96 kilohertz operation there. And then on the top right, we have our optic HMA connectors on this particular example. You can have the other optic styles of connector installed there as well. Next to our right-hand side MADI split, we have a USB port. This will allow you to look at firmware updates, as well as setting up external control software for using this remotely. And then you have your word clock BNC. So as I've already shown you, this is where you would plug into your external word clock source. So what you need to do is press and hold roughly for about 2 seconds, and then the menu will lock itself. Now, to set the optical ID, you scroll down and then you get into the next menu. You use your left and right arrow keys to then go through your optic ID range. The next option is to look at the resetting of the rack. What is quite useful is there is a "are you sure" kind of second step to confirm before you reset everything.
We're going to be getting rid of, when we reset the racks, are the gain settings, the phantom power, the output attenuators or pads, and any settings on the MADI cards are the splits. So those are the four main things we're going to be getting rid of, yes.
Hello and welcome. Today in this video we're going to go over our second part of the two-part series of our Optical and Racks webinars. Before we go any further, let me introduce my partner in crime, Fernando Delgado. How are we doing today, Fernando?
Good morning, Tom. How are you? I'm very well, myself.
Good stuff, good stuff. Have you been keeping up to speed with what we were doing in our basic video, our first part?
I have indeed, and I have lots of things to show to people here today with my consoles and your racks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, would you like to give our viewers there, Fernando, a quick rundown of what we're going to be looking at today?
So today, well, as you guys can see, we've got an SD9 and an SD10, and we're going to be sharing some racks and sharing some cards and checking some of the Optocore details as well, a bit more advanced, and we will do some examples as well. So, very complete day.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to build on what we learned on our first webinar, and we're going to be connecting up all the racks again, and we're going to be then looking into further details, for example, the cards and rack splits, the gain tracking options on these, the sample rate conversion in the SD rack, as well as getting the orange box on the optic loop as well. So without further ado, let us begin. First of all, we're going to go run through the LCD menu on the SD rack. Okay, so have a look and hopefully you'll pick up some more information from the VT which is about to play. So play VT. Now I will take you through the LCD menu on the SD rack. We will look at this comprehensively and hopefully you will pick up a thing or two. The first menu is the main menu. This will show the following information. R. Which port is accessing the outputs of the rack? M equals MADI, O equals Optical. S. This is the rack sync source. M equals MADI, O equals Optical, INT equals internal, and W equals word clock. ID is the Optical ID of the rack. 96 kHz is the sample rate being used by the rack. Below are the following letters W, M, X and O. This equals the sync priority order, which defaults to word clock, MADI main, MADI aux and Optocore. An upward arrow will appear underneath each of the available sources of sync. If multiple valid word clock inputs are connected to different racks, the rack with the lowest Optical ID that is receiving a word clock will become the sync source for the entire Optical system. It all automatically adjusts for you. Now, let's unlock the menu and scroll down. The next two menus will allow adjustment of the Optical ID of the rack and the fiber speed of the optics. We have seen the setting of the Optical ID. Keep it within the realms of the setup theory we have covered. Up on screen you'll see the 14 IDs available. The default fiber speed is 2 GB. 1 GB was used in the old D series consoles, so make sure you're always set to 2 GB. The next menu allows selection of which rack component is addressed by the USB port. The default setting is rack. When set to Opto, this allows for the Opto board to be utilised. Gains and phantom can be controlled via USB. The next page allows for selection of the rack sync source. The default setting is Auto, which allows automatic sync selection in the order selected in the rack sync order page, where the default setting is word clock, MADI main, MADI auxiliary and Optocore, W, M, X and O. We saw this on the main display. To manually override a specific sync source, set to one of the following. INT, which means internal sync, where rack is the master. Word clock means external word clock sync, where the word clock input is master. RXM means MADI sync, where the MADI input is master. And RXX is the MADI aux sync, where the MADI aux input is master. And finally Opto, which is Optical sync, where Optocore is master. Moving down, we get to the rack sync setting. This option only works if the rack sync source is set to Auto, the window previous. The default setting, as we saw earlier, is WMXO, which allows automatic selection of sync order, priority to word clock, main MADI, aux MADI, and finally Optocore. This setting can be manually overridden and a specific sync priority order can be set as shown from any one of the combinations on screen. The next window allows selection of the rack routing mode. You can choose which external source, MADI or Optocore, is being routed in and out of the rack. The default setting is Auto, which allows automatic routing selection where the routing mode follows the rack routing order setting. This setting can be manually overridden and a specific routing source can be set as either RXM, where MADI main routing, the input and output routing is via the main MADI input, or RXX, which is MADI aux routing, input and output routing via the MADI aux connection. Opto is where the Optical routing comes in, input and output routing via Optocore. Now you can see on screen what the order looks like. When set to Auto, green is the main, amber is the second, and red is the third choice. The next window is the rack routing order. This page allows selection of the rack routing priority order, which is used when the rack routing mode is set to Auto. The default setting is M, X and O, as shown, which allows automatic selection of routing order priority. This setting can be manually overridden and a specific sync priority order set. Again, these are the same symbols and letters used as previous and the orders are up on screen. The next menu is the rack main and aux splits. This page controls the MADI split options as well as the aux MADI split options. Each split can be off, on or on with automatic gain tracking. This is represented by a GT. The sample rate of the split signal can be set to be either the same as the rack's current sample rate, cis, for example 96 or 48K, or cis divided by 2, which is half of the rack's current sample rate. This included sample rate converter is phenomenal, allowing you to send 48 kHz signal to your broadcasters whilst keeping your system running at 96 kHz. The MADI type of the split can be set to standard 56 channel, 64 channel or SD rack, which will emulate the output of the SD rack and be recognized as such by the receiving MADI device. This last setting would be useful if the split was feeding an SD series console. These controls and settings are all available for the aux MADI split as well, as shown on screen. Next is the rack card splits. This page controls the individual output card split functions. The settings are off, on, or on with automatic gain tracking enabled. Each input slot, blocks of 8 sockets on an input card, can be split to its corresponding output slot. So slot 1 would be split to slot 8, slot 2 to slot 9 on an SD rack and so on. This setting allows you to use the rack as an active splitter. The next windows allow you to activate an internal oscillator based inside the SD rack. This will automatically assign to the outputs. When cycling through the first window, you'll be prompted to confirm your selection with sure, just to double check before this is activated. The next window will allow the setting of the dB values of the oscillator. The increments are shown on screen. The window following this will allow selection of the frequency of the oscillator from 20 Hz to 22 kHz. The next three options relate to the following: power supply readings, I/O card code versions and the MADI pod firmware versions. The first window shows the readings for all rack power supply voltages. The second window shows I/O card code versions. This page shows the type of card detected in each rack slot and the firmware version installed on the card. SL1 to SL14 reads from left to right on the rack. Date codes are set in the British date mode, the day of the month first, as it should always be. And the third window is MADI card code versions, which shows the MADI pod firmware versions installed on the rack. No adjustments are possible from these menus. This page shows the SD rack type that the MADI pod is currently used for. This is the next window along. Options are SD rack, SD mini rack and SD nano rack. Set this according to the rack type being used. Perfect for when changing MADI pods from SD mini to SD racks. And finally, the rack defaults. This page allows yourselves to set all rack parameters to their default values. Use this as required. So there we have it, the rack menu and how you can use it. Remember, leaving the settings on auto will provide the expected working function of the rack when it is connected. You have great options to adapt the rack as and when you need to as well. So there we have it. That's the LCD menu on the SD rack. Remember, if you want to consolidate that knowledge, please download the SD rack user manual from our online support section. I'm not sure about you, Fernando, but I always like reading a manual just to consolidate the knowledge. They're quite useful sometimes, aren't they?
I am a manual person myself, Tom. I really like them. I think they're very handy and useful, and they're always there for you. So, but in any case, if people don't like to read them, that's why we're doing this video.
Well, exactly. We don't like to make sweeping statements or judgments of our users out there, but there we go. Right, so we're going to crack on now and start up with the examples. So, without wasting any more time, I'm going to now start connecting up the SD racks, the SD mini rack and the SD nano rack, and Fernando is going to show us again what the Optocore diagnostics and things like this can do for us when we're connecting up to begin with. So, let me begin. Fernando, over to you.
Okay, so while Tom connects things, I'm gonna go on my SD10 and I'm gonna open my diagnostics window and click on the Optical tab. Here I can see a list of the devices that are being connected to the optical loop. As you guys can see, I've got a list, sort of an inventory of devices, and as Tom connects, you guys will see more things appearing on this list, okay? There's a few columns here. The first one, labeled ID, is just going to tell us the ID of the device connected, or the type will indicate if it's an SD engine or a rack. So you guys can see Tom's just connected another one. It's just popped up with a label SD rack, so it just added another rack. There's also some information about hardware and firmware versions, and the most important one I think will be the column label loop, because it's a very quick way to know if you have connected everything, if the loop is not closed, or if you left a rack switched off. Imagine on a big theater when you have many devices, that will help you identify which two nodes are not talking to each other. So in a minute I can see that we will have a closed loop. The moment Tom connects IDs number 3 to IDs number 22, which is just happened now, everything is up and running, and we have a closed redundant loop. That's great, Tom. Thank you.
So there we go. Yeah, I have green flashing lights on all of my LCD menus on the SD racks here, which tells me that there is communication between the desks and the stage boxes. Brilliant. Now, as Fernando said, we now have closed the loop, so this is now redundant, and we can now look at a few further things. So, Fernando, Optical details. Let's have a quick look at this window.
So first thing, I'm going to open my Audio I/O tab. I'm doing all these on my SD10, but we will have to do the same things on the SD9 because we need to have the same racks declared in both, okay? So I'm going to conform all ports, and you guys will see how all the racks will appear in my inventory. To the left, there you go. I have the 3 racks. It's not conformed, it's not remapped. I'm gonna do that just now in a minute. First, I've got to add those racks to my SD9 as well. So I'm gonna conform my ports on my 9. There you go, it's picking up all the racks. And once it's ready, I can hit remap, which is, I'm gonna do it from my SD10, okay? And there you go, I've got all the racks now added to the session. The first thing we're gonna be focusing on today is the optical details, which is down here. And when I open it, the first thing you see is like a diagram in which indicates what cards are present on each rack, okay? I can see the 3 racks there and how many cards I've got. Then I've got a little more information underneath about the loop, like for example, the total number of available channels, which is 504. I've used 80 inputs, 88 outputs, so I still have 336 channels available in the fiber. And then there are 3 buttons, really important here. The one I'm going to be using first is the clear all outputs, and that's because the way I have conform ports will indicate which console gets all the output cards allocated to it. So far I did this on the SD10 first, so that console's going to grab all the cards. And to have a starting point, I want to have all the cards unassigned. So I'm going to clear all the outputs, and that means I'm going to have all the output cards unavailable for any console and unassigned, okay? And then there are two other buttons there, broadcast all output IDs and broadcast only my output IDs, which I think Tom can give us an explanation.
Yeah, absolutely, because remember, with the Optocore system in place, we can actually lock down output cards and input cards to individual consoles. This is highly useful when you're sharing multiple cards between multiple desks, but you only have or need access to a certain few XLRs, for example, across your slots of 8 outputs available per card. So this is the system which allows you to lock this down per console using the console's IDs. So as Fernando has said, with the clear output IDs, this is now relinquished all control, and it's now a free-for-all, structured free-for-all obviously, but obviously you would probably want to dictate who is controlling which output card. But any console can now grab those outputs. Inputs are freely assigned across all of the desks. Basically, you always want to be seeing your input channels coming in or input signals. Outputs can be split up and designated. So the broadcast all output IDs button is very useful because it will broadcast all the output allocations assigned from the current console across all the other consoles in the system. So as long as the other desks have the same ID, it's a very useful, quick way of assigning the exact same output setup with a single button press from your one console. Very, very quick, very, very useful. The broadcast only my output IDs, as the name suggests, will only broadcast your current console's output IDs to the extended Optocore system. So again, if you know that you only need access to a few output cards across some setup SD racks, you can press this quickly at the beginning of your setup to initialize this the setup, essentially. It's essentially there for speed of use, isn't it, Fernando? It's quite a rapid button press.
And for adaptability, so you can get to any festival or any concert which has a setup already in place, and you can add your consoles. It's just very quick and effective. Yep.
Really, really good. So yeah, for your initial setup, so that clear all output IDs is really useful because now, as I said, you can go start assigning the outputs, which I'm sure Fernando will be showing how to do.
So the first thing to show our friends out there is, as you guys can see on my SD10, all my output cards are showing some things, some red letters. Okay, let's go and explain them. So the first thing I want to see with you is underneath every output card there is the word DAC. That's just the label for the card, and there is an X next to it to the left, meaning that card is not being assigned to any ID just yet. So underneath that there is a big cross or a tick depending on if it has been assigned or not, and that's the one you will use to grab cards for your console. Okay, so I'm gonna grab cards number 2, 3, and 4. The moment I do that, the X above is changed to a 1 because the ID 1 is taking control of those cards. So if I go to my SD9 now, I can see those cards are grayed out now. I can't pick them up because they are allocated to the SD10, but I can pick up the other ones, which I'm gonna get, for example, that one, and that one, the 3 last cards. And now I can see on my SD10, ID3 has taken control of those 3 output cards. The card number 1, we've left it unassigned for future examples. Tom, I think that's gonna be handy.
Yep, no, as is planned.
But perfect. And I just now need to remap my system. There you go. And I'm ready to go.
Obviously, once you remapped, what do you need to press? That lock optical tab, everyone. Please do press this. Don't press it right now, Fernando, because obviously we need to go through some other examples. So you've locked down the cards across the different racks. I want to now go into the, how I can be in receive only and full control of these specific stage boxes. So show me where I need to go, Fernando.
Okay, so far we have just allocated the output cards. But now we can select the next menu above, which is splits and sharing. And I'm gonna do that in both my consoles, because here's where you can declare racks to be shared and what the status of that sharing will be, okay? So the first thing, if you follow my mouse, I'm gonna declare my rack as shared, and I got 3 buttons there. Isolate, which means I don't get any gain changes and I cannot send any gain changes to the rack from my console. I'm completely isolated from control. Receive only, that means that I will get tallies from the rack. I will get gains updates from the rack, which will be controlled by another console, but I cannot send my own settings to the rack. I'm in receive only mode. And then I've got full control, which means I can control all the gains, and that's what I'm going to do on my ST10 full control. That means it's the master, put it that way. And I'm gonna go now to my ST9. I'm gonna declare the same rack as shared, because this can be done by rack. And I'm gonna say, okay, you are in receive only mode. So now my ST10 is the master one. ST9 is just receiving inputs from the rack and using the trim with gain tracking, which is the next thing we will probably be looking at.
Awesome. So let me go plug in some signal into the SD rack in front of me, and then we can give a nice little example of the gain tracking working. As I do that, I do want to just quickly remind people how our Ripple root function can quickly allow you to patch everything in, because it is rapid. Right, 2 seconds.
Okay, so in the meantime, I will start patching what Tom will connect. So I've just come to my bank number 1, channels 1 to 12, but they can be any, of course, you guys know that. And I'm gonna open my channel, and I'm gonna just do a small Ripple route of just 2 channels, okay? I'm gonna go to my rack ID 11, and I'm gonna patch just 1 and 2. Okay, I've got them 2 there. You guys see those 2 channels, and I've got some gain already. Okay, I'm gonna make that bigger so you guys can see. Okay, that's on my ST10, but I need to do, because we are sharing the inputs, what I'm going to do is gonna go to my ST9, and I'm gonna do exactly the same. I'm gonna ripple 2 channels, inputs 1 and 2 from my ST rack, and as you guys can see, the moment I did that, I got the signal coming in. So now if I change the gain on my ST10, you guys can see channel number 1 on the ST9 is also changing. And that is because I haven't applied gain control, gain tracking control, okay? Which is what I'm gonna do just now. I'm gonna go to my ST9, and you guys see here the track button. I'm gonna click on it, GT, gain tracking. The moment I start moving the gains, you see the compensation taking place. For every dB that I go up on my analog gain, I got a dB going down on my trim. So it's all up and running, Tom.
That's great, and that's a good reminder of how to set up the gain tracking as well. Ideally, you want to let the console or the engineer controlling the rack in full control to set the head amps first, and then on the receive end on the SD9, you set the gain tracking or activate gain tracking once those head amps have been set. That way there'll be as minimal movement across your head amp gain pots as required. But remember, if you need to boost or decrease your local level, you use your digital trim. So yeah, that's about it. And it's that easy regarding setting up your splits and sharing. Let's have a look at setting up these console send and receive ports now, Fernando, because we're looking at the racks, which is great, but now I want to be able to send information to the SD10 and SD9 on its own separate sort of send and receive ports. So how do we set this up?
This is one of my favorite things that you can do, because we can create virtual ports which will communicate consoles directly. So the way to do this, each console has to have a send, which will send things to the loop, and it will have as many receive ports as consoles are present in the loop, okay? We only got 2, so I'm just gonna have 1 send and 1 receive per console. My advice here is just create the sends and allow the consoles to automatically detect the receive, okay? That way it's a bit faster and safer. So let me do it. I'm gonna go to my ST10, to my audio I/O page, and I'm gonna go add port, add OptoSend, okay? So what I get is like an output card, and I can add as many as I want, up to 56, okay? we're gonna leave it with just 8 because it's enough for the example. Then I'm gonna go to my SD9 and I'm gonna create again an opto send. Once I've got created these 2 send ports, I just need to press COM4 ports on each console and they will detect automatically each other's ports and configure in a much easier way, in my opinion. Once you're finished, you go to setup, remap, and now we have communication between both consoles without going through the racks. Great.
Yeah, perfect setup there, and now we can start sending information between the consoles. So there we have it. That's essentially what you're going to be looking at when you're setting up multiple desks across multiple racks, and how you're going to be setting up that splits and sharing tab specifically. Right, now we're going to go and have a look at how we can start splitting some signal from the SD rack itself, from the MADI pod, as well as from the card splits options that we have inside this rack as well. So let's go crack on and do these cards and splits. So first of all, I'm going to go look to set up the S21 that I have here so I can receive some incoming MADI signal correctly. Okay, so I'm just going to go into my main menu on the S21. First of all, just going to have a quick look at the audio sync button there. This is where I can see my current sampling rate, which is 96 kilohertz. Remember, the S21 is a 96 kilohertz out of the box ready console, as well as my clock sources. So if I'm going to be receiving my MADI signal, I'm going to be wanting to clock from the receiving DMI card. So I'm going to set this up right now and select it from here. I'm going to leave it at 96K for now because I'll show you how we can swap the sampling rate with the awesome MADI pod features on the SD rack. So first of all, let's go connect up the split. Now, Fernando, show us where we can actually turn the MADI pod split on from the desk as I connect this up.
So here in the audio I/O page, if you select the rack you want to split and then you go to splits and sharing, to the right we will see the MADI splits main and aux. Okay. There's a button called gain tracking there that will automatically not only switch on the gain tracking, it will also switch on the split itself, because by default it's switched off in the rack. So I'm just gonna hit it now, and that means a red LED should have pop up in the rack.
Yeah, absolutely correct. So we now actually have this split turned on with gain tracking activated. So I'm just going to show how I can patch this into the 21 now. So go up to the top of your channel, press at the top of your channel and go into your source selection. You're going to go down into your DMI slot where the MADI card is, and we're automatically going to be seeing a 64 channel MADI stream. Okay, you can also see some signal coming in. So that is directly feeding from the SD rack as we speak. Press conform because I'm coming out of an SD rack. I want to be discovering this SD rack inside the S21. There we go. I actually have all my 56 channels here available. And then the last card, which is my Dante module, which is in the SD rack. So all I need to do is change my input channel from mono to stereo and then press mic 1, which will automatically patch to the right leg for my stereo source. Again, on the right hand side, you have your phantom and gain, and this is actually an incredibly quick way of setting this as you're diving through your channels. Just select at the bottom, as you can see, to update which channel you are looking at, input 15, input 11. So, as Fernando showed, we have some signal coming in, but this is currently gain tracked. So, Fernando, can you just go move your gain pot, please, on your SD10? As you can see on the S21, my head amp gain completely changed then, but the level isn't changing coming into the desk because we are gain tracked. So I'm now just going to go into the SD rack menu to turn off this gain tracking from the split, just so you can see what the difference is. So let me just go unlock the SD rack. I'm just going to go find my options here. At the moment, it's got gain tracking turned on. I've now just turned it to on. So Fernando, can you just change the gain again? Now you can see that the level is changing across that signal that is coming in. So remember, let the master console set the gain first, then you can turn gain tracking on either from the rack or from the desk. So Fernando, if you just want to turn that on from the desk again. Perfect. Cool. So next what I want to do is change the sample rate on the S21 down from 96K to 48K, because at the moment I'm only taking one BNC split from the SD rack, so I'm only actually getting half of the information available to me. When we're running at 96K, remember to take two BNC splits from these two output BNCs from the SD rack. So let me go into my main menu on the S21, and I'm going to go back into Audio Sync and change to 48K. I'm now going to go back into my SD rack menu and find my MADI split sample rate option, and this time I'm going to go to cis divided by 2. So what I now have is a 48K split signal feeding my S21, which is now set to 48 kilohertz sampling rate, all whilst the SD series with Fernando is still running at 96 kilohertz. So that's pretty impressive, isn't it, Fernando?
It's a broadcaster's dream.
Absolutely. You also have another. I know it is phenomenal. You have another button next to your gain options, don't you? It's the reset.
I do, Tom. There is a gain track reset which will put the trim back to 0 when you need, because that will do it to all the 56 channels available at once. So it's very handy when you really are out to another gig and you remember that you were splitting. If you want, you can just gain track reset all your rack just with one press of a button.
It's great, isn't it? So if you, from a broadcast perspective, at the end of a particular gig, maybe at a festival, you've had your gain tracking active throughout your gig, and you just want to reset that to give you a full range of control. Again, simple button press, there we go. So that is how we can take the BNC split. Let's now have a look at the card splits. I'm actually going to do this from the rack again, just so you can see the difference in operation. You will notice though it will update on Fernando's consoles. So I'm going to find the option again. Let's go down to my card split. So I'm on to my card split, so split slot 1 to slot 8. I'm now going to turn this on. Straight away on the DAC module, you're going to see a green light turn on, which will indicate that this card is in a split mode. So literally, what's ever coming in on signal 1 is now split to the corresponding output. Whatever is coming into signal 2 is split to the corresponding output on the corresponding output card. So this is why we left it free, wasn't it, Fernando? So we can show this working. Now, I'm just going to take an output from the first socket here and plug that into my local I/O on the back of the 21. Remember, you've got 24 mic line inputs on the back of this console, which is pretty impressive. Now I'm just going to go patch this signal in. So again, tap on my source. I'm now going to go find on my local I/O mic 24, and there it is, all patched in. So there is my signal bin split from my input card to my output card. Now again, this is sort of a gain signal coming in, so I could adjust this on my console, as you can see, but I do have gain tracking options at the same time. So what I can do is actually look to turn this on with gain tracking. Now I have a red LED that's now turned on at the bottom of the DAC to tell me I'm in gain tracked mode, which is awesome, because now you'll see that I don't actually have any control of this signal coming in. And Fernando, if you'd like to play around with some of that signal too, you'll see that it's still updating on the left hand side and not on the right. So there we have it. That's how we can take our split signals from our inputs to our outputs via the cards and from the BNCs. What are we going to have a look at now then, Fernando?
I think we can start adding more things to our loop. Probably it would be a good idea to connect the orange box and to allow our friends to enjoy the benefits of it.
Okay, so let me go and break the loop and then add some more things into it. Fernando, it's probably a good idea just to update everyone with how this looks on your diagnostics window.
I will. So that's exactly what I was going right now. System, diagnostics, optical tab. We can see the loop is still closed. Now he's disconnected IDs 11 to 24. I remind you guys, it's very useful to know which two IDs are not talking to each other. Okay, and now he's just added the orange box. So what I see here is actually an optical DMI, okay? So it's all added to the loop. It's not closed just yet, but Tom is working on it. In the meantime, I will have to add that new device to my loop. So again, I will press the button conform all ports on each of my consoles, because I remind you, we have to have the same devices in both consoles in order to be able to remap. So let's go and let's add it to my SD10. There it is. And I'm gonna go now to my SD9 and add it. So there it is. Okay, once it's all, yeah, let's just remap and up and running, Tom.
Cool. So now I'm going to just go add the S21 into the orange box now, but connecting up the MADI BNC ports. Now we're going to be running at 96 kilohertz, which means that I'm going to have to use 4 MADI BNCs here to connect and get full connection of all 64 channels at 96K. So again, let me just go remove some of these options that I'd plugged in and start connecting up.
So we can convert from any format to any format with that orange box, can we, Tom?
Yes, no, we can, Fernando. The orange box provides huge benefits to anyone using DiGiCo systems, and it also allows integration with further network systems such as Dante, as well as utilising the Klang DMI card as well. Fernando, can you just take people through the benefits of this?
I think that would be my favourite one, the Klang, actually, because you can add a Klang DMI and it will take one of your MADI ports in the back of the console, and it will give you 64 channels in 16 binaural mixes. So it's amazing. Then you can just connect your iPad or computer to control it, and there you go. You have a fully immersive monitoring system for all your MADI fitted consoles. It's really, really handy.
It is, and again, yeah, even though it is a DiGiCo product, that Klang solution isn't necessarily unique just to DiGiCo anymore. Utilising the orange box and our Dante 2 modules, we can actually get our 96 kHz Dante signal to and from Klang, so you can go set that up wherever you need your 3D immersive mixes, because that is the next thing really, and it does sound phenomenal. Please check out the Klang videos that the guys have been doing. If you haven't heard it yet, you will be blown away. Okay, so I've now connected up the orange box with the MADI BNC ports, which is all good, but I need to go change my sampling rate again on the S21 back into 96 kilohertz. So let me just go back into this. Again, clocking doesn't need to change because I'm going into the orange box system, and actually this is all automatically sorted via the Optical network. It's very, very intelligent. So I now have a full connection into the optical world, and one way that I can actually use this is to send multi-track signal from my S21 into the domains of the SD series over there. So using the inbuilt UB MADI on the back of the 21, I'm just going to go set this up now. So first of all, let's just go into my channels here, and I'm just going to go set up my UB MADI source as my input signal. So let me just go quickly ripple route, say 1 to 40 there. And if I then go click play, we'll start seeing some signal coming in. So we have signal coming in at the top of our channel. I'm now just going to go down to my record send option, and I'm going to send this out onto my DMI2 slot. Now again, I've updated the rack information on the S21, so it's going to ask me to conform again. This time it's going to conform back into a 64 channel MADI stream, which you can now see. So all I'm going to do here is go ripple route 1 to 40 again. So now channels 1 to 40 are going to have the output signals of their input sources sent directly out onto the DMI card. Again, this is now being split at the head amp gain level post trim. So if we had an analog source coming in, you will have full control of that via the sort of gain tracking side of things as well. So Fernando, can you see some signal coming in?
I can indeed. So I have my audio I/O opened, as you guys can see on my ID number 12, which is the orange box. I can see signals coming in. They are already patched to my first 12 channels, and there you go. It's fully up and running on my SD10. Let me show you guys on the SD9. The same signals are coming in. This is the perfect environment for a soundcheck, virtual soundcheck.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very simple thing to set up as well. Remember, I have sort of covered the orange box in previous episodes, but up on screen now you'll see the setup window that is being utilized for this setup. Okay, so just a reminder of how you can utilize the orange box. And it's very simple to set up, as you can see. So I've now got my multi-track, maybe my virtual sound check, been piped into the SD series from a standalone console using my orange box. Fernando, do you have anything else to add from today?
I think that is very good, actually. I think we have covered all that we really wanted to stress out, and I think we're pretty much done.
Yeah, I think we've gone over some detail there, and I hope that you've all been asking some questions as we've been going through. And until next time, I guess, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to produce this video for you. Any further questions, please feel free to contact us at any time. And until next time, take care, wear a mask, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.